Hello, welcome back, and thank you as always for joining me here. Let's take a look at what's really going on. Yes, an unflattering look, because it is unflattering. It's intended to get our attention. So let's take a look at what's really going on when we side with the ego instead of God. Let's take a closer look at what you're really saying when you do this. And my hope is that at the conclusion of this discussion, you'll want to choose God, the Holy Spirit, light, truth, love, instead of illusion and sickness and more of the same, pain, decay, fretting, anxiety, and fear. Yeah, that's the hope here. It's the hope in every lesson is that you take what speaks to you the most, which is your inner teacher speaking to you unequivocally. Never doubt that. Taking that message or those messages, whatever that may be, and putting it into practice in your life. This is how we learn. It's how we truly learn this course, through our practical application. It's through our doing it and putting it into practice that our experience shows us these ideas are true. As I often say, we prove this to ourselves. Want proof? Excellent. Prove it to yourself. That's the best way. It's how we learn. We're moving forward in the text to chapter 10, section 5, which is entitled The Denial of God. How about that for a title? Yeah, when we side with the ego, when we think we're individual self-sustaining survival units, separate from God, separate from our brother, this, in other words, separate from other things that happen to look rather similar to this, when we think that, we're denying our own identity. In case you're new to this course, let me repeat that in case it caught your attention, and I hope it did. When we side with the ego, we're denying God and we're denying our own identity. Our own identity. Capital I, yeah, we're denying who we really are. Do that math. I invite you. If it's frightening, no problem. You'll hear it again. You are one with God. Ideas leave not their source, and we are the thought of God, the extension of God, which remains in the mind of the thinker. So who, what, and where are you? Yeah. Yes, just yes. Now, there's a very important point that I want to make a little bit further on that will help you. Or so I hope. See, the reason that it's up to you is because our inner teacher, the Holy Spirit, does not force. Jesus does not force. God does not force. Remember, God's not separate from us. So there's no one to force. There's no separate other being over whom to claim lordship and from whom to demand sacrifices and fealty and stuff. There is no separation of any kind. You're not forced to put these ideas into practice, though I certainly invite you to do so. You're not forced to do that. The Holy Spirit doesn't force. Your inner teacher waits for you to allow him to guide you. So if you're experiencing extraordinary resistance to the sheer truth of the statement that you are one with God. Who are you? That is the ego that's resisting. If you're experiencing fear and resistance, it is the ego that's resisting. Just know that. And that may be where you find yourself. And if it is, not a problem. This happens to every single one of us on this journey, this progression, this thing that we refer to as the spiritual path. Quite naturally, we're going to encounter moments of resistance. It's an opportunity, should you choose to see it, to forgive. To forgive whatever is coming up that you deem unpleasant, whatever causes feelings of anxiety or fear or abject rage. That's an opportunity to forgive what appears to be causing that and forgive yourself for dreaming it. Release it to your inner teacher, the Holy Spirit. Invite your inner teacher to direct your forgiveness. What you say to yourself mentally each time will probably be very different. But the core of it, the essence of it, is the same. This is the practical centerpiece of A Course in Miracles, true forgiveness. This is something that we've talked about on several specifically dedicated videos here in the past, and we will certainly do it again, because again, it's the practical centerpiece. So here in chapter 10, section 5, Jesus talks about the God of sickness. Oh yeah, no, the ego, illusions that we take to be ourselves. Here's one. Illusions that we take to be ourselves, our status, our job title, things like that, our occupation, our political leaning, if any, right? All of the things that we use to define ourselves here in the world. The God of sickness. Does this last? Certainly not, even though we would all like to believe that it does. The truth here in the world is this is 80% water. It's got guts and bones, and the things that this body is made up of are not precious in and of themselves at all, are they? It's not the Son of God. If you've never heard that, you'll hear it again. If you continue to tune in here, you'll hear it from me, and you will hear it from others. You are on the path. Understand that we can deny the truth of these teachings all we want, but there's no going back to the way things were. It's unworthy of you to return to the mental place that you were in when you embarked on the spiritual path in the first place. You did this at whatever time you did, whether it was 15 minutes ago or lifetimes ago, because you heard the voice of our inner teacher and you realized and accepted that there's got to be something more to it than feeding this thing, than giving this thing water and engaging in all kinds of excess activity and putting up with all kinds of BS in this life so that this thing can have a roof over its head. And, you know, nothing against that, but there's more to it than that. And you know this, or you wouldn't be here at all. But that's true of any spiritual tradition, of which this course is just one of many. But here you are interested in this. I invite you to stick around. So the God of sickness is an illusion, and it demands that we be upset and depressed. Joy is not allowed. Think of the way we conduct our lives here, wherever you happen to live. This is an international audience. So, of course, there appear to be variations in different societies with the way lives are organized, with the way governments are organized, all that kind of thing. But we're invited to be frantic, aren't we? Listen, I live in the United States. I would know. We're invited to run at a breakneck, hectic pace, always faster, faster. Stress is looked upon as normal, even as a badge of honor. Really. People pride themselves on multitasking, on trying to do 27 things at once without devoting attention to any one of the 27 things. Therefore, none of them works. And we wonder why. Not flattering. It's where we appear to find ourselves. Emphasis on appear to. Again, denying God is to deny our own identity. And what do we perceive if we deny life? Death, decay, pain, and frustration. All of the things that appear to characterize life in the world. So we're told something here at the end of paragraph 1 that I hope that you find really heartening, even though it's not flattering that we're worshiping at a temple of death, in a manner of speaking. In a manner of speaking. We're told that we can't really do this. We can't really separate from God. It's not possible. So we're invited, when we study A Course in Miracles, to accept what the Course refers to as atonement for ourselves. Now, this does not mean exacting revenge against somebody for something that we think that they've done to us. Not that definition of atonement. The Course's definition of atonement is the correction of our inner teacher. We accept the correction of the Holy Spirit. Central to this is our acknowledgement, our recognition that the separation never occurred. There is no separation of any kind. We seem to think that there has been, which is the issue. That is the problem that calls for a solution. We don't have 8 billion problems. We have one. We don't have 99 problems. There's one, the separation. Studying and practicing this course with emphasis on practicing, doing this course brings about a complete 180 in our perception, a complete shift in our perception. Total. It is either total or it's not at all. We can't keep some remnants of our judgment and blame and our fear, our paralyzing fear and unconscious guilt that we carry for this perceived separation that never actually took place, but we are certain that it did. We've managed to convince ourselves that we're 8 billion individual self-sustaining survival units. We've clearly managed to convince ourselves of this. So in this fear and delusion, projection naturally follows. What I mean by that is we blame someone else because we see our brother as someone else. We don't see that he's one with us. We see him as someone else, an SOB who's out to get our stuff. So we better strike first. We better construct an elaborate defense. We better worry and stress about it. And you know what? I don't feel good when I'm worried and stressed, so I'm going to project it outward. It's his fault. It's someone else's fault. It's the government's fault. It's our neighbor's fault. They did it. They caused my deep unconscious guilt and pain and suffering. I can't stand it. Understood. So I'm going to put it off on them. That's projection, which flows naturally from an allegiance to the ego, the god of sickness. Again, we can't really do this, but we sure think that we have. We're invited, instead of seeing our brother as evil and separate, to see the light in him, to see God in him. What happens then when we see it in ourselves? It's very true that as we see our brother, we see ourselves. You want to know why that is? There is no separation of any kind. Your brother is you. He is not related to you. He doesn't, I mean, he may live next door to you, but he's not separate from you. He's not your closest of kin. He is you, literally. We're invited to see the light in him. We're invited to see God in him. We're invited to see our brother as one with God. When we do this, so we see ourselves. It's an invitation put in different words to no longer blame, to lay down our blame and judgment, and rather to forgive the Son of God. He didn't really do anything to you. There is no separate other who can transgress against you, nor can you transgress against them. 1 equals 1. It does not equal 2. It does not equal 8 billion. The simplicity of this is disarming on purpose, emphasis on disarming, yes? It can produce extraordinary resistance. So I don't know if you're experiencing that at the moment. If you're not, fantastic. If you are, understand it's the ego that's resisting. So you're invited to forgive, and an excellent practice of forgiveness would be to forgive the ego itself, forgive the god of sickness itself. It is nothing. Forgive and release, and rinse, repeat every time we remember to do it. It's why we cultivate habits in spiritual practice so that we can bring our forgiveness lessons to mind, because our experience is going to show them to us in a procession that seems like it never stops. Anything that is not wholly joyous is an opportunity for us to forgive. So the ego's religion, the god of sickness's religion, calls for sickness, and it calls for look at me, poor me, I'm a martyr, or it calls for attack. They're really the 2 forms of the same thing. Attack, separation. It calls for the reinforcement of separation and sickness and death. And when we side with the ego, we're bowing down to sickness and death, accepting it as the Son of God's lot, his fate on this twisted spinning ball of rock that's spinning through this thing we call space and wobbling, which means something we call summer at one point, then winter the next, unless you're at the equator, and it's all the same day, which it is anyway. All of these appearances, all of them, illusion. What's true? Oh, God, love, you, Remember, you're not the physical body. So we're invited to come back to our own identity. Really, that's what this conversation is about. That's what this course is all about, is an invitation to us to return to our own identity rather than identify with the ego. Identify with God. That's an invitation that goes out to all of us all of the time. It's constant. The question for us in the present moment is always, are we listening? And if we are we going to do what our inner teacher suggests that we do? Because, as always, it's going to be a gentle guidance, loving guidance, never forced. Because we've got to learn these forgiveness lessons ourselves. It seems beautiful and fanciful to say, hey, I wish Jesus would just wave a magic wand and take all of this away, and I'd be instantly enlightened. Well, that'd be cool, wouldn't it? But we have to learn our forgiveness lessons first. When we're adult learners, we have invested all of our belief in this thing, in the God of sickness, in the ego, and in this world and everything that appears in it. We've accorded it all of our belief and faith, and we need, almost all of us, a process for undoing this in our mind. Enter A Course in Miracles. So we've got to be willing to know ourselves. So are you willing to know who you really are? And when you do it, accept that while you are a creator, you're one with God after all, you've been created. The ego doesn't want us to accept that God created us. All of this happens outside of the concepts of space and time, which are actually separation ideas, aren't they? I don't know that you've ever thought of them of that, but if you haven't, we appear to be separate from our brother in this thing called space. We think we're this. Other things like this appear to be separate from us in space. They may be just a couple of meters away, or several different time zones, or an entire continent away. And we appear to be separate in time, which we assume is this radical construct that's linear, with one moment following the next in measurable sequence. All the measurements that we've completely invented and made up. Just saying. We appear to be separate from those who have come before us. Maybe we have loved ones that have passed on, and people that haven't been born. We appear to be separate in time from them. And even here on Spinning Ball of Rock, we've conveniently carved it out into these 24 segments of 15 degrees longitude apiece, more or less, until governments start playing with and manipulating them. We call them time zones, and we appear to be separate from our brother in time zones, and we just accept that this is reality. It's not. There is no separation of any kind. In fact, separation is impossible. God is the author. The ego doesn't want us to believe that. The ego wants you to believe that you made yourself. You did not make yourself. God is the author. Only God is. Here's the thing. God extends himself. Like extends like. Love extends love. Not hatred, not separation, guilt, pain, blameworthiness, and fear. Love extends love itself. So we simply accept God's authorship, as it's called here in the Course, fatherhood, whatever you want to call it, his creatorness. But you're not inferior. There is no separation of any kind, remember. Like extends like. So I remember some 20 minutes ago or so using the word unflattering for our blind adherence to the ego and its strange and unnecessary religion of excess activity, frustration, death, pain, decay, and projecting blame onto your brother because it's his fault. We're invited in conversations like this to do exactly what you're doing right now, which is so, so important. And that's take a pause out of your daily life and contemplate this so you'll be inspired to put it into practice. And that's always my hope, is that you'll be inspired to put it into practice. It is so, so important that you do exactly what you're doing right now and take time out and entertain these ideas, which most of us don't learn growing up, do we? I certainly didn't. I don't know about you. If you did, fantastic. Keep extending love and forgiving the Son of God wherever you find yourself. And along the way, should there be questions, that is actually quite natural on the spiritual path. And why wouldn't it be, right? We're looking at nothing less than the truth of who we are. And you know what? You deserve nothing less than truth. So here you go. Now, it's up to you as to what you do with the messages of the Holy Spirit. I mean, really, it is. Again, the Holy Spirit does not force. Jesus does not force. God doesn't force us. There's no separation of any kind. We have to supply our willingness ourselves. And the Course properly refers to it as a little willingness. There's just a little, even hint or a half second or a split second of willingness and allowance and acceptance of our inner teacher's guidance. He'll rush in and do the rest. We do have to provide that willingness. Now, along the way, there are going to be questions. So this is a forum for those questions. If you have them and you'd like to ask them, please feel free to leave them here. And there've been a number of really excellent questions and discussion topics posed right here in the comment thread on YouTube. And we've had several videos here very recently that were special request topics. I'm always open to those. We're going through the text of A Course in Miracles, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking a pause and addressing a topic of interest to you about this course, about your spirituality, because there can be a lot to unpack as we completely 180 degrees change thought systems naturally. So if you've got questions, please leave them here. And if you've not yet subscribed, I'd love to have you join us. Please go ahead and do that. The subscription arrow is here in the corner of your screen. Just go ahead and click on that, and you'll be prompted to subscribe and join us here. Several videos appear a week, and it is a forum for discussion and questions. All right. So I thank you for joining me. I will see you again very soon.